Hey, I'm Gene Young, and I was born in Lansing 82 years ago.
I'm Marguerite Strange. I have been here since 1941.
I'm Jack, middle initial E, and last name is Walker. I came out here in 1970.
Leavenworth was a lot different than it is today. Leavenworth was a wide open town. We had gambling, drinking, and the Star of the West Saloon was right across the street from City Hall.
The little city of Leavenworth had just about everything you needed right downtown. There were women's clothing stores, there were shoe stores, and you didn't really have to go anywhere to get the basic needs that you may have. Lansing was really just a burg then.
Lansing today touts itself as Leavenworth County's second largest city and one that is growing, but the city's beginnings were humble, to say the least.
The grocery store was Campbell's grocery store, and almost everybody in town ran a tab there. When us kids would go over and get a loaf of bread or a pound and a half of round steak, they would write it down in the book, and everybody was paid once a month, and then my mom would go over and pay for it, and she'd always go to the candy case and get us out a sack of candy whenever mom paid the bill. So, and then we had it was Foster's drugstore, which was next to that, and next to that, south of that was Thomas's Cafe.
What you see in Lansing was at one time the end of the world, so to speak.
Most people in town had wells. There was usually one good well in every neighborhood, so the kids always got to carry the water to the homes. And everybody had outhouses because there was no city water until after 1940.
Leavenworth has changed a lot. One of the things they did were many of the older buildings are torn down through what they called urban renewal. We lost a lot of beautiful buildings because of urban renewal. The Abdullah Shrine building was where there's a parking lot on Shawnee Street just east of Davis's funeral home. That was the big shrine building. And right across the street, it wasn't from urban renewal, but Davis Molden's mother owned a building that was called the Castle. It was built by a doctor who built it for his wife. It was changed or modeled after an Italian castle. And it was a beautiful building, but of course it outlived its days. And Margaret used to have weddings in there and parties and things. Matter of fact, I even helped serve some dinners in there. There wasn't two rooms on the same level. You had to go up one step or two to be able to get from one room to the other. But it was a beautiful building, but she had it torn down. And Davis's parking lot is there now.
While Leavenworth went through several life cycles of a bigger city regarding growth and change, its smaller neighbor to the south struggled to find its identity. Lansing's residents did so by finding common places to gather and talk.
Because there was no house-to-house mail delivery, and everybody had to come to the post office every day to get the mail. So that's why that was a hub where everybody got together.
When I came here, we had 9 different railroads that went through Leavenworth, and many of them stopped here. The Santa Fe was out on where the Santa Fe Depot restaurant is now. That was the depot, and it went north into Atchison and on, I don't know just where all. And then the other depot down the Riverfront Community Center, there were several tracks and different railroads that came through there. And then there was one that went across where Choctaw Street's at.
In the early to mid-1900s, transportation modes of the day, mainly the railroad, helped bigger cities grow and made it possible for smaller communities to gain a place on the map.
There was a railroad spur that went out Ida Street to the Brighton mine.
And thanks to the local rail lines, coal could be moved to serve not only local needs, but the needs of communities further away. For local residents, another form of transportation took hold.
And then we also had streetcars. And where the library's at today, at 5th and Spruce Street, was the streetcar barn. And then it was turned into a grocery store. Then they bought it, the city bought it for the library. So we had, but the streetcars used to go into Kansas City. And then we, later after the streetcars were gone, we had buses that went to Kansas City, and I used to ride them during the war. We'd go to Kansas City shopping.
When I was in grade school, the early years in grade school, the interurban was still running. I think it was 1937 when it stopped, and then the buses started. Leavenworth Kansas City bus or transportation bus started, and it went up. Both of them, the interurban and also the buses, went up K Street, or not K, but up Kansas, and then run on a diagonal through the countryside to Walcott, and that's where the power station was that powered the interurban. But the buses, after it went up Kansas, then it went over to Highway 5 and down Highway 5 through Welborn and Bethel and down that way into Kansas City, Kansas, and then over into Missouri.
Progress could be measured by the widespread use of mass transit, but that didn't mean the comfort of riders was always assured.
Well, they were 33 passenger buses, but during the war, especially in the evening hours, the soldiers trying to get back to Fort Leavenworth, I counted 75 on one bus. They were just piled everywhere, even in the luggage compartments.
The transportation network in Leavenworth and Lansing continued to grow, and the monuments of that earlier time still stand in many places today.
The old bridge that used to run across from Fort Leavenworth over into Missouri started out as a railroad bridge. And then when they changed the way the tracks run, they took the rails up, and then it was used as a car bridge. Matter of fact, I learned to drive on that. And I took driving lessons through the high school, and it was just barely wide enough for a car to meet another car on there. And I was scared several times. But that was it. And then we decided we needed a new bridge, so the city of Leavenworth actually built the bridge that is there now. We floated bonds, and it was a toll bridge. And we bought a road right away over Missouri, the old 45. We built that to cut down that through the back way to get down to the other highway where you cross the railroad tracks down there. We bought that, and then we run that as a toll bridge for, 20 or 30 years. And then when it was all paid off, we had to paint it, we had to fix it all up, bring it up to date, and turn it over to the state of Kansas. And then the roads over there in Missouri, we turned them over to the state of Missouri. So but the city of Leavenworth built that bridge and paid for it.
Centennial Bridge in Leavenworth was one of the main access routes into the area from the east. From the south, travelers would use and popularize a state route known as 773. But back in the early days of this highway, there were several choke points.
Because it was a two-lane highway, there were people lost their arms on the bridge south of Lansing, where they had because people drove with their arm out like that in those days, and they would cross in the middle of the night, and someone would lose their arm. There were a lot of wrecks on that bridge out there because it really wasn't hardly wide enough for two cars to pass at that time.
With local growth and more pass-through traffic, local leaders were faced with seeking funding to expand the north-south network to accommodate those who increasingly used it. But with this growth came sacrifice.
We had to pay a small amount of money for the highway, but that was the only way we would have ever gotten a 4-lane through here. We suddenly lost our downtown because they demolished 17 houses and buildings in 1 week, and that was devastating. Suddenly that wasn't there anymore, and where's our downtown going to be? And that was frustrating for years after that. But people had talked about that 4-lane for 20 years before that. I read that in yearbooks, years before it actually happened, that they knew someday that would happen.
We are sort of isolated. When you think about it, you're either traveling on Highway 773 or you've got to use a lot of back roads to get here. In our Leadership Leavenworth Lansing class, our major project was to work on the marketing of 20th Street. And we were all assigned roles that somebody was going to be the mayor, somebody was going to be the part of the press, and so forth. And that was our class project. And it was sort of interesting as we went through this is it really going to work?
We'd wanted to get that street on the west part of town. And the county was going to do some grading and this sort of thing, trying to get it done. But that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted a main traffic way out there. So we ended up going to Washington. We talked to Bob Dole, Nancy Cassabaum, and Jim Slattery, and got enough money, I think it was $8 million, $7 or $8 million, to build 20th Street from Eisenhower up to Spruce Street. And we have a beautiful 4-lane highway there, which is a traffic way.
I went to grade school in the building which is now the Zinser Apartments. That building was built in 1923. It had 4 rooms in it. Each room had 2 grades, so there was 8 grades in that building. I had the same 4 teachers all 8 years. They didn't change. And then I went to high school, and that building was also built in 1923. And I graduated from high school in 1946.
The local education system and its institutions were similar in many ways to the rest of the country and experienced many of the same social changes that helped make Leavenworth and Lansing the diverse communities they are today.
The schools were segregated when I came to Leavenworth. And we had one out on 5th Avenue that now I believe is a church. And several of the schools were segregated. And then they changed that, and all kids could go to school in the district where they lived. Schools have changed a great deal, but one of the good things we have in our schools here are the Army people that go to school here. It enhances our schools for our kids, because some of these children have traveled all over the world. Some of them come from all different places, and it makes a lot of difference, and I think helps our children in school.
I knew General Colin Powell when he was here. His daughter and my son were classmates at high school.
Out of the historical diversity of an installation that attracted people from all over the world grew a facility that is now recognized internationally as a cradle for future leaders. It's a benefit to those who come and go, but an even bigger jewel for those who stay for a lifetime.
The Command General Staff College was what made Leavenworth's name, if you will. The Command and General Staff College is still preeminent, if you will, but there's an awful lot of what goes on in the Army that takes place at Leavenworth. And its name has changed over the time to become that of the intellectual center of the Army.
The military impacted us a great deal. In the first place, many people in Leavenworth worked up on the post. So we had big payrolls from up on the post. And then, of course, I've already said something about the schools. With school children, they impacted our schools and really made a difference in our educational system.
Today, there seems to be more involvement between the fort and our communities of Leavenworth and Lansing. Simply because of the number of retirees, the more people are living out here, and the broader mission of the fort, it's changed over the years.
I mean, there's members of the retired military on almost every volunteer group in town, church, city council. It's tremendous leadership. There's, years and years of leadership there.
Fort Leavenworth has grown. The population has also grown on the fort. And as a result, you have more people living off post and being associated as a part of the community than you did back then, full time, that is. So in reality, it's a win-win for the community. And whatever's good for the community is healthy.
Along with the military presence, another sector, corrections, played and plays a dominant role in shaping the community. It's not only about how people from outside the area view us, it's about how we view ourselves.
People knew about Leavenworth, but when they thought about Leavenworth, they didn't think about the military prison, they thought about the federal penitentiary.
We were known as a penitentiary town. And when I was city clerk and would go to the international meetings around different places, oh, you're from Leavenworth. Yeah, they gave me a 2-week furlough. Always had to kid about.
Well, the prison was always important. When I was in grade school, almost all my classmates' father worked at the prison. There were a few that did other things, but most of them worked at the prison. So that was a big influence on the whole town. And in the prison, there were many things that they helped with. They helped with the streets, and the few street lights that we did have were furnished by the prison power.
Leavenworth is known either for the college or it's known for prisons. And I always like to tell people, yeah, we got a lot of prisons here. It's the safest place in the world to live. When one of them gets out, they don't want to stay with us, they want to come see you. So, it's a great place to live. But those prisons provide jobs, and that's important for our community. And the soldiers who are guards up at the DB or at the Joint Regional Correctional Facility, when they transition out of the Army, they've got a perfect job source that to which they can turn for employment, and you get trained people. The cooperativeness between the community and the fort, I think, is real.
Being the first woman clerk, they didn't think that I needed to be paid as much as men did. When I first went to work down there, the city clerk was the highest paid position in the city employees. And then after I went to work, they changed it. It kind of went downhill a little bit. But anyway, I was in charge of the building inspection and the city treasurer, the meter readers, and of course all the bookkeeping and I went to the city commission meetings on Tuesday night and was in charge of all the ordinances. All the books that belonged to the city were under the city clerk. When we first went into the city manager form of government, of course we hadn't hired a manager, but we needed somebody to be able to sign papers and to act as manager. And as being city clerk, I got the job. So I was city clerk for about 3 months. And believe me, when I found out that Al Phelan was available and was wanting to come back to this area, we ended up hiring him right quick. And I said, you need to be here by July. So he came on board then. And I got out. I found out city manager was not the job I wanted. I loved being city clerk.
I was the youngest one on the council. That's why I'm the only one left. But it was interesting because I did more listening than talking, because the druggist, Mr. Kendall, he had great leadership and ran his own business and was older, and so it was, we had a good mix of people, because I would paint the lines on the street. I painted the first city hall sign, and I would do everything like that. One time I was an acting mayor, a couple of meetings, and Mr. Redmond, who later became a city councilman, he was shooting rats sitting on his back porch, which you're not supposed to be shooting in the city anyway. And anyway, we brought him up there and talked to him, and he didn't like that very well. And then so that's when he applied for city council, or run for city council. After that, and won. He got, I think he was on it either 1 term or 2 terms. So it was kind of interesting. I was the acting mayor that time when he came up, so that was interesting.
I was appointed to the Leavenworth City Planning Commission, and I said, Planning Commission? People get mad at you on the Planning Commission. You're messing with their property, and you tell them what they can't do, and things like that. That's the way it started for me, and I've been, obviously, I just left the Planning Commission after 20 years and had chaired it for 15 years, and so it was time to give somebody else a shot at that one. Still involved in other things in the community, so that's sort of the background of how we got to where we are and how I got involved in the community initially.
From the sacrifices of these community leaders and longtime residents, their hard work and dedication of yesterday leads to an optimism that abounds about the future of Leavenworth and Lansing.
Our community is going to grow. With the Main Street and the Chamber of Commerce working, I think that it's going to be getting bigger.
Lansing's still going to grow. I would say 10 to 15 years from now, Lansing will have 20,000 population.
Are we at some time going to be part of a metroplex where we become an adjunct to Kansas City? I don't know. I sort of hope not. We've got our own unique character here, and but what would I want to tell them about? Well, just some of the people that have come through here. I knew General Colin Powell when he was here. You know, these are things that I could tell you about. I can remember when the vice president came. Interesting. We had the president of Indonesia here. This is a moving place. And is it New York City? I hope not. Don't want it to be that. But yeah, it's sort of interesting. What would you tell the youngsters coming along? You know, I'd have to think about it, because right now I'm living in the midst of it. And I suspect there's some folks a lot older than I here who could tell me, well, young man, you just don't know anything. And I don't think of me as being a young man anymore, but there are people that have seen a lot more changes here than I. And it would be very interesting what you would tell somebody in 20, 30 years. I won't be here to talk to them about it, but just really don't know. Except that it was a good place to raise my family. My kids went to school here. My oldest boy was in the first full year's class at West Junior High School. Before that, wasn't even there. Now we point at it and say, oh, that's getting old, isn't it? So, and we talk about things like that. The Carnegie Arts Center in Leavenworth wasn't the Carnegie Arts Center at the time, but good place. Both Lansing, Leavenworth. I think there's a future for us out there.
I think it's some of these things that we're talking about, the young people today don't know about, and I'd like for them to be able to know a little bit more about it. Johnny Johnston's books help a lot with the history of Leavenworth, and I would like to see the young people learn more about the town that way, what was here. day we had the grand opening of the fire station, the fireman gave me a beautiful fire music box with a fireman on it that plays my hero. And I call that my fire station, and my fireman down there.